Warren Cann has got together with a German called Hans Zimmer to create something that they call Helden. They'll be putting their music to laser light next Tuesday evening at the London Planetarium. And Warren's been telling me how he and Hans got Helden started.
Well, we met each other about 3 years ago. And after a while of being friends, it became obvious that we should really work on some kind of project together. We started work on an album, which we designed from the word go to be made into a movie. In a way, the album itself is something new because we tried to make it not a soundtrack for a film and not a real straightforward type of concept album, because they're always very dodgy, those. We tried to make it something that stands up entirely on its own. You don't need to know anything about the story that is contained within it. You can just enjoy it as a record.
Why did you move to the Laserium show?
Well, Hans and I have had one or two one-off experiments in the past where we've taken the latest in musical technology, which is usually designed to be used in a studio. So therefore, there are a lot of difficulties involved when you try and use them live. You can't tell an audience, oh, hold it for a second, and take 5 minutes or half an hour to get a sound the way you would in a studio. But we find it challenging to use these things. We've been using the Fairlight CMI. There's only about 100 in the world, and we thought we'll make it all instrumental just to see now with the Fairlight how far we can push using these things in a live context. And rather than do it at a gallery or something, because that's, you know, there's all sorts of arty connotations implied there, we settled on the planetarium because it's the kind of place that doesn't give you arty-farty or rockist vibes, man. It's just a good place. Families go there. It's not snobby. A nice environment inside. How
much control do you have in the visual images that are going to go with your music?
The whole thing is a hybrid because we've got codes, computer codes that are keeping everything in sync between the lights, drum machines, some things that we have ourselves done. That's on tape. That's in itself running the Fairlights, which are all interlocked. You see, what you've got here is something that never before in the history of performance has been feasible. You have, in effect, the opportunity to clone yourself in live performance.
I've written down a question here that said, is it limited? I'm not going to bother to ask it. It's limited by your own ability and imagination.
Exactly. And people, as they become more familiar with this type of performance, will themselves learn to judge the difference between someone who's using it in an interesting way and exploiting the possibilities rather than someone who's just making a load of noise.
I thought you were going to say something else for a minute. There's one track that you're using, at least as a basis for your performance, although it'll be live, which is called Eva. Now, you're both working on that, but shall we have a taste of it before we talk about it?
Sure.
That's Warren Cann and Hans Zimmer. That's a song that they call Eva. One of the many tracks they're performing in a show that they also call Helden, German for Heroes. That's happening at the Planetarium in London on March the 1st.
Yes, that's right.
Who are the heroes, Warren?
It's a very rough translation into English. It's very tongue-in-cheek. It's kind of a play on words on the mythical Wagnerian figures. When Hans and I got the idea for doing an evening's instrumental music using computers to just see what would happen, because you can't mock this kind of performance up on paper or in your head, because it's not often done. You can only just attempt to do it, and then as you go along discover the traps, booby traps and pitfalls that have been lurking for you. We thought, we'll do our favorite pieces of music. Let's do all classical music and some film theme music. And then we thought, well, let's do some of the tracks off this album, but let's rewrite them, rearrange them as classical pieces so that it fits in with the other things.
And this album isn't going to be released until when?
I think early summer, May, June, sometime around there.
All right, so a bit of a preview here. Now, are you going to work together again in the studio? Is this a sort of long-standing thing that's going to work?
Yes, yes, very much so, because there are a lot of other areas that we're active in. The whole reason for Hans and I forming Helden was to kind of escape the way the music business always puts you in a compartment. Even with Ultravox, even within that context, there are things that I like doing that I find easier more convenient to do with Hans, because there's only two of us. I mean, it's easier to make decisions rather than when you're working with four people. I'm trying to have my cake and eat it too, because there's a lot of very good things about working within the context of a group. So I'm really trying to have it cut both ways.
And this isn't doodling, it isn't just fun, it's something you're very serious about.
Oh, yes. I mean, we spent about 2 years putting the Spies album together.
2 years?
Yeah, that was primarily because we could only work on it when I had time off from Ultravox, but it was a definite blessing in disguise. It enabled us, if we had 2 weeks of recording, and we knew we wouldn't be back in the studio again for maybe 2 more months, it gave us 2 months of grace to constantly evaluate what we did. In a lot of cases we would say, yes, this is good, it stands up. Or, no, this isn't quite right. Those 2 months gave you the distance that you need to view something objectively.
There's one track on the LP that was almost written by your engineer.
Yeah, Steve Rance, our engineer, is an integral part of Helden. And Steve came up with this short piece of music based on mathematical formulas. He had, say, a dozen tentacles, each tentacle leading to a synthesizer in its own right. So he would have one sound, a different sound, and so on, so on, and so forth. We really liked it. We had to give it a melody and make it go somewhere. But it's a nice, light piece of sort of humor on the album. It's good. I like the atmosphere of this piece.
And what did you call it?
Moonlight in Vermont.
Moonlight in Vermont. Helden, Warren Cann and Hans Zimmer. And you can see them live at the London Planetarium on March the 1st.